According to Mark Stein, Daryl Morey is still trying to pull off a James Harden trade, and James Harden himself might be all about it. That's what we're hopping into on today's show. But first, with less than a month to go until the NBA trade deadline, this is your one-stop shop for the best 76ers coverage on YouTube. So join the movement and the fastest-growing Sixers channel as we give you the best, most informative, and fastest Sixers news and rumors. Hit that red subscribe button down below, and let's talk some hoops right now. Welcome into Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Sr. Let's hop right into it. Daryl Morey continues to be infatuated with James Harden, the same player who he maneuvered for when he was the general manager of the Houston Rockets. Harden went on to become a star, and now that Harden's with the Brooklyn Nets, Daryl Morey is still trying to pull off a trade for one of the best offensive players we have seen in the history of the NBA. These rumblings, all according to Mark Stein on his Substack, as well as NBA executives across the NBA. This is what Mark Stein had to say yesterday about Morey's interest in Harden. Perhaps Joel Embiid has also been sold on a concept that executives with a growing number of rival teams say they see as Morey's new preferred scenario: keeping Ben Simmons beyond the NBA trade deadline to exhaust every last possibility for executing a complicated sign-and trade in the offseason that finally brings James Harden to Philadelphia and routes Simmons to the Brooklyn Nets. Complicated is a polite description for such a deal, yet it must be noted that there is enough noise circulating league-wide about Harden's reported openness to relocation this summer after he turned down a lucrative extension from the Nets in October to give Morey the encouragement he needs to wait. Now, it was about this time last year when Daryl Morey almost pulled the trigger on a trade for Ben Simmons to get sent to the Houston Rockets and bring back James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers to team up with Joel Embiid. That trade, of course, did not come to fruition. Harden was then traded to the Brooklyn Nets, where he really went on to have a really good year when the Brooklyn Nets were dealing with a bunch of injuries to key players like Kevin Durant as well as Kyrie Irving. Now, James Harden is, of course, starting to get a little bit older in the tooth. We know that he has never really shown the willingness to come into NBA training camp in the best shape, but even though he's getting a little bit older, this guy is still a walking bucket. And the two-man game between James Harden and Joel Embiid really would be fascinating, and I think it's a really good fit to team both of these guys up. Now, I've warmed up to this idea over time because Ben Simmons' trade value has gone somewhat downhill. But James Harden, even given some of the baggage that comes with him, still an excellent offensive player and would be an ideal fit next to JoJo. After a slow start to the year this year, James Harden has really started to pick it up. And last year, when KD went down, he was really in that conversation to win MVP before he suffered that hamstring injury. But now KD is injured once again, and Harden is going to have to step up. Right now, up to this point, he's averaging around 23 points per game. Joel Embiid is really playing like an MVP. Harden continues to put up really good assist numbers. His field goal percentage, three-point percentage, somewhat of a concern. Joel Embiid, on the other hand, having one of the finer seasons of his career highs in three-point percentage, and you just think about them working that two-man game, a little pick and roll, a little pick and pop. It would be fascinating to see Harden come back to Philadelphia if a trade does come to fruition, not before the NBA trade deadline, which is kind of interesting, but after this year. Of course, if any deal of any significance happens, we have you covered right here on Philadelphia 76ers Now. Philly-owned Chase Sr., giving you the latest Sixers news and rumors. So before we continue to break all of this down, I want to ask you this, Philadelphia. Stand up, sound off in the comments section. What is your level of interest in James Harden? Scale it for me from 1 to 100. We'll continue to break down these rumors here in just a second, but get those votes in right now. Do want to give a shout out to today's presenting sponsor, BetUS, for making 76ers Now possible. A wonderful deal that they have going on. Our sportsbook partner, wonderful sponsor here at Chat Sports. If you go to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code CHAT125, you get a 125% deposit bonus. You plug in $100 into your account. automatically you get $125 back. That's $225 to game with. Yes, the Eagles are out of the playoffs, but we're in the thick of the NFL playoff race. You can make some bets on NBA games. How about NBA prop bets as well? Joel Embiid plus 1,400 odds to win NBA MVP. What that basically means, for those of you not familiar, you put $1 down and Embiid goes on to win MVP. You get nice value there. $14 back only if you put $1 down. One more time, promo code CHAT125. Utilize that great deal, lay down the money, and be a man. As for James Harden's contract, we broke this down a little bit earlier and on yesterday's show as well. Harden did not sign that lucrative contract extension over the summer, and now that's why these rumblings are surfacing about him maybe leaving the Brooklyn Nets to leave Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So Harden can opt in for $47.5 million for next year before tacking on a 4-year, $223 million extension onto that deal. The most likely scenario for a Sixers acquisition would be a sign-in trade, so that's what they'd be paying Harden into his mid to late 30s. And I have some concerns about that, but really, are you thinking all that much 5 years down the road because you're trying to maximize the Sixers' potential right now and give Joel Embiid, that legitimate co-star, he's never had flanked to his right or his left? This would be a short-term play for Philadelphia, trying to maximize that title contention window right now in this current moment. I, of course, have some concerns about how James Harden ages. He's dealt with some injuries over the last year plus. He has never shown the most willingness to really come into NBA training camp in peak shape. We know there are legendary stories about Harden frequenting strip clubs. Allen Iverson did the same thing, and his career didn't last as long as probably a lot of people had expected, anticipated, or hoped. And Harden's game is really predicated on one-on-one. So if he loses some level of explosion and he loses some of that power from his legs, is he going to be able to dribble the ball for 20 seconds of the shot clock and take some of those step-back shots and create some space, create some buckets for himself? Those are some of the concerns I have about James Harden, but still, he is an elite offensive player, and at the end of the day, you're not worried about 5 years down the road. You're just trying to contend for a championship in the immediacy of the moment. And right now in professional sports, aggressive wins. And Daryl Morey has always been aggressive. So why not swing for the fences and go after a player who he acquired when he was running basketball operations for the Houston Rockets? He was able to pinpoint the special talent that James Harden would become down the road when he was an MVP player, when he led the Rockets to the playoffs and deep playoff runs. Now, of course, Harden's play and the style of it hasn't translated to deep playoff success, but James Harden became a star under Daryl Morey. Morey has always been aggressive, and that's why the asking price for Ben Simmons remains as high as it is. So with the Ryan Howard swing for the fences, I'm saying go for it if I'm Daryl Morey, even though I have some of the concerns about how James Harden ages down the road. Now, speaking of Ben Simmons, Charles Barkley never misses an opportunity to slander Ben Simmons, and the soft guy that he is, Barkley on the Sixers and Simmons right now. Simmons is never going to play another game in Philly. The fans won't forgive him. They have to make a trade. You have to move on from a bad relationship. They're not using him and Joel Embiid. And Embiid has been playing great this year, so they're wasting Joel Embiid's talents. And that's what I continue to say about Morey not making a trade of Ben Simmons to help Joel Embiid out. Charles Barkley, he kind of feels the same way that I do about where the Sixers are as an organization. And
I'll tell you what, man. The Philadelphia 76ers have to make a trade of Ben Simmons. It's an absolute joke that they haven't sent Big Baby Ben away because Joel Embiid is playing like an MVP. They got to maximize his prime, man. Ben Simmons is an absolute fraud. He doesn't have the mental fortitude to play in the city of brotherly love. So trade away Ben Simmons, maximize Joel Embiid's prime, and let's ride.
That's a decent Charles Barkley impression, right? Impersonation? Hey, I did it on the fly. I was like, should I do it? I had to do it. I also want to ask you another question before we get out of here. Grade it for me, A, B, C, D, or F. What should the Sixers do with 2-5? Type T for trade him prior to the NBA trade deadline. W for wait after the year and maybe wheel and deal for James Harden. Get those votes in. Who else is doing Charles Barkley impersonations and breaking down the latest Sixers news and rumors? If you haven't subscribed, you ain't alive, and you better right now. Thanks for watching today's show.